All right, good day to everybody wherever you're joining us around the world, and thank you for joining us for this webinar today titled Understanding How Weather Impacts Shipping Digitalization. We've got an awesome panel of guests today. I'm very excited about this, and we are spanning the globe ourselves, which is a really exciting thing for us. So my name is Rennie Vandeweg. I'll be the moderator for today. I am the Vice President of Weather Operations at DTN, and we'll start to introduce our guests this morning, starting off with Frank Paleokrasis, who joins us from BSM's Analytical Division. Good morning, good afternoon to you, Frank. How are you today?
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. All good from sunny Athens.
Excellent. Also joining us is Kevin Knott, a Senior Manager of Technical and Operations at BWLPG. Kevin, how are you today?
Oh, Rennie, and thanks to DTN for this invite to join this panel. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Also joining us is Jarko Vandenbrink from DTN. He's a Senior Strategic Product Manager, of shipping here at DTN. How are you today, Jarko?
All good. Welcome you from the Utrecht office in the Netherlands.
Excellent. And I am here in the United States in Norman, Oklahoma, which is a huge shipping hub, if you weren't aware. We're actually in the middle of the country. But it's an exciting topic today. We're going to dive into some of the challenges and exciting factors in digitalization and shipping. Want to start off a little bit on a higher level, talking about roles and responsibilities. Frank, I'll start with you. If you could give us a little bit of background on your position and some of the responsibilities of your role, as well as kind of how you define success in your position.
Sure. So, well, I'm a naval architect and marine engineer by educational background. I've been with the Schulte Group for the last 12 years. I started off on the ship owning side. And 6 years ago, I moved back to Athens and joined the ship management side, the group management side of it. And I started off a new function, specifically targeting fleet performance. So I established the Fleet Performance Center, which is looking at the performance of all 400 fully managed ships. And about a few months ago. Quite a few months ago now, I started a new role as head of data governance and analytics, which is something entirely new. So I shifted from operations to digital, which is, again, a little bit of a logical transition, given that I've been dealing with analytics on the operational side. So under my new role, I'm looking at expanding the role of analytics within our organization, defining things such as governance structures around data, all things that basically been doing, but not in a comprehensive and systematic enough manner, if you want. And ultimately, the success of my role, the success of my position, is to enable fast and confident and objective decision making using data. And of course, this will come through integration, simplification of work, building the tools that this requires, and ultimately automation processes.
Excellent. Kevin, I'll pose the same question to you. If you could describe a little bit your role and responsibilities and how you define success in that role.
Sure. Yes, I'm a senior manager with the Technical and Operations Department with BWLPG. Primarily responsible for the monitoring of the performance of the entire BWLPG fleet, including our in-chartered vessels. I'm also actively involved in the monitoring and analyzing of any of the voyage optimizations that are being carried out, and also much involved in the monitoring of our fleet emissions, which is obviously a very big subject at the moment as part of our company's ESG strategy. For success, or definition of success, would be, and certainly as far as the fleet performance is concerned, is when a vessel completes the entire voyage, having utilized voyage optimization successfully, and the overall performance has mirrors or matches our expectations and benchmark, or even in some cases exceeds that. So that's my definition of success.
Excellent, excellent. And Jarko, as a strategic product manager for shipping here at DTN, a little bit about your role and responsibilities and what you're focused on.
Yeah, sure, Rennie. So I'm serving DTN for 15 years now, in various positions. I have a background in meteorology, so I'm really coming into the shipping market from a meteorological angle. Also have a background in applied physics and technology. So that's a little bit my background. Definition of success. Want to have the best experience, I would say, for seafarers and also for the shore-based crew in order to make informed decisions and helping them with that. And I think one of my personal goals is to also look at the environment, of course, to see how can contribute maybe a little bit to a better world in that sense.
Excellent. So we know that digitalization it's kind of a buzzword, right? It's used all over industry, and I'm curious your definition of digitalization. I'll start with you, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly said, it means all kinds of things for everyone and every company, even ultimately. The way that it has worked out, at least in the shipping industry, has been to basically move away from paper records, right, and ultimately move everything into a digital format. Of course, that's not the end target. It's not digitizing information, it's actually using the information that is digitized, of course. And I think there is more and more focus in that direction right now. It's a long journey, and I don't think that it's one with a very defined goal in the end, because there will be more coming. So moving target.
Moving target, and new technologies really play a role in this too, right? As our ability to digitalize and turn things into data rather than paper. The world is sort of out there for us to sort of see some exciting insights that come from that data. Kevin, I'm curious, where do you view the industry on this journey of digitalization as we stand today?
Okay. Well, as the shipping industry can generally be perceived sometimes as having a conservative outlook or approach, more so when non-mandatory or regulatory technology is involved. But having said that, I think with the case of digitalization, it is something that needs and should be embraced by all segments of the shipping industry. And as we see that develop and the structure becomes more profound and used, then obviously and becomes embraced, we'll see basically the systems and the processes, etc., moving forward. It has to be a positive thing as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. And so, what do you see as the biggest advantages then to going to digital? You know, what gets you excited about that, of what's out there in the kind of the big frontier ahead?
Well, certainly as far as BWLPG is concerned, we have recently invested in a sensor data real-time platform that monitors many data points on board a large proportion of them. So this gives us a transparency between what's happening on the vessel and the officer shore. And this transparency can also be passed in some limited form to our customers, our charterers as well. In fact, we have this particular platform we're using. We actually have 3 chartered vessels that have the system fitted. And so, yeah, it shows that everyone is singing from the same sheet and everyone knows at the same time.
Sure. Frank, how about you? Where do you see some of the biggest advantages of going digital in the shipping industry?
Well, I have to first of all agree with Kevin here. Transparency is a big topic for us because we are moving away from the paradigm of withholding information as a form of power, right? So we here are going to large stretches to make sure that transparency is part of our core business model. Ultimately, just right now, actually in the next month, we'll be doing a release in our ERP whereby ultimately the office side, the vessel side, so the crew, and our customers, the owners that we manage the ships for, will all three sides will be seeing exactly the same data, exactly the same analytics. So everyone can jointly work towards the same goals, right? Increased efficiency and decarbonization relate to the topic today, let's say. But beyond that, digitalization, we're talking about data here, and ultimately it's about objectivity. And data does not lie, of course, can be bended, and it all depends where it comes from, and all of these discussions about it. But ultimately, when you're basing your decisions on data, you're talking about objectivity. You remove the human element of subjectivity from that, and of course, ultimately integration, which is a word I keep repeating, I know, but it's what will ultimately allow us to bring the insights from one platform and the other, and bring all the functions together into a common improved outcome.
Sure, and a common operating picture, right, where you sort of have the same view in one spot of everything that's going on. Absolutely. Jarkko, I'm curious from your perspective at DT and as somebody that's supplying insights to the industry, how do you view digitalization as an advantage to the industry?
Yeah, so both I agree with both, right? And having said that, benefits are, I would say, for the whole supply chain, getting that information together, doing advanced analytics on that data, and that's what nowadays possible, gives huge insights and support in the decision making process. So bringing that data together is key in that sense. Yeah.
Sure. How about obstacles? I think Kevin, you'd mentioned that the industry has been conservative, I think was the term that you used. How does that present obstacles? What are some of the other obstacle challenges that you see the industry facing as we make this transition into digital?
Which is always going to be challenging. So that's probably the first one. But we briefly discussed that anyway. I think obviously the actual data integrity, obviously there needs to be systems and processes in place to ensure that the data you're receiving is obviously accurate. There is a danger when data is presented so well that it becomes the reader or the user accepts that as being verbatim. This might necessarily be the case, particularly in the case of sensors, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, there should be some sanity checks along the way. Obviously, with any digitalization system, then obviously the importance of cybersecurity, unfortunately. This is something that has to be in place, whether people are trying to enter your systems just for malice or to cause a disruption, or worst case, even for malware or ransomware, something like that. So, and then obviously you've also got the aspect of this data could be technically and or commercially sensitive. So that has to be protected as well. So these are things that obviously need to be, well, and are being addressed, but need to be looked at continuously. Yes.
Sure, Frank. How about you? Any other obstacles that you see in this changing world?
But I would fall back to what you mentioned in the beginning. It's a cultural matter. At the end of the day, it's the human element is strong here. Nobody likes change, and any such shift from paper to digital, from handling data as it is to actually analyzing it and understanding the outcomes, the whole issue of understanding data and being able to interpret it in the correct manner. Data literacy, actually, is the right term. These are all items that can only be addressed in a stepwise manner and ultimately present barriers every step of the way. But as with everything, it just takes time.
Sure. Wanted to stop here real quick for those that have joined us in the webinar. We have a Q&A function as part of the webinar. Please feel free to ask questions. We will do our best as time allows to ask those and answer those questions. And again, we're just so glad that you're joining us. So as we jump into kind of how we approach digitalization, wanted to sort of get your guys' perspective on how you're managing this. And I would imagine there's multiple challenges that exist. Number one, sort of the physical labor of going digital, right? Taking that paper data, turning it into digital data. There's technology challenges. There might even be, as you mentioned, cultural, even within organizations where you're having to convince executives to invest in digitalization and so forth. Frank, I'll start with you here. How are you managing this change? Is it using custom system integration? Is there turnkey platforms? Where are you kind of focusing?
We are extremely lucky in this respect. We have a very tech-forward CEO who has been the head of our group for nearly, well over 10 years, 20 years, I think, nearly. And as a result, we quite early invested in a software house, and we have our own in-house software house, Mariapps, which develops our ERP. And this is ultimately the software, the platform that our entire company runs on. And it's a broad item. It covers all aspects of ship owning and ship management. Of course, available for third-party sales, but this is not a sales pitch. But what I'm trying to say here is that ultimately everything is built in-house for us, and whatever we don't have, we end up building, or we work with partners for specific areas that we see that it makes sense. So, of course, coming to the weather aspect, for example, for DTN, we know that we could never develop weather capability, right? So, of course, we're going to have to work with partners to obtain that type of data.
Kevin, how about you? What's your approach been? How are you managing digitalization? I think you might be muted. I am not hearing. Are you guys, Frank, do you hear him?
No, I can't hear him either.
Okay, trying now.
There we go. We got you.
Oh, okay. Yes. So yeah, we recently invested in an external platform that we use for our sensor data, real time on board. We internally have designed our own digitalized ESG dashboard with the help of some external consultants, but primarily being driven from internally. That presents its own issues. Because a lot of that data that comes from the ships is digitalized already. So that's fairly easy, but there are certain aspects of the social and governance side of things that are not quite so easily to digitalize, and they still have to be fed into some sort of data warehouse before they can be picked up. But yeah, these are two examples.
Great. Jarko, from your perspective, you have the opportunity to work with a lot of different shipping groups. How are you kind of seeing the trend from your perspective on managing digitalization?
Yeah, so what you see, and that was also one of the hurdles, is that there is a different level of expertise about technology. So shipping companies differ in the level of expertise. As they're shipping companies, not technology companies. So what you see is that some of them struggle with technology, other ones are far advanced. And that's also a little bit where they find solutions. So some of them want to have an all-in-one platform, what they use, and some of them are, for example, in DTN's case, integrating their data directly from DTN. So either using platforms where we are also supplying data towards, or having that that proprietary integration. I think that's a little bit also depending on the level of expertise in house, and most of all, that's also then depending on the fleet size. The medium and small fleet size companies usually outsource that kind of capabilities, where the companies with a bigger fleet size often have that in house in their proprietary systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, I'll ask you this here. What's some of your biggest frustrations as you're working through this digital journey?
Again, change tends to be resisted. It's not always welcomed, but you obviously it has to be brought on board, and people have to get to embrace it. You transferring data, and obviously you have to then validate the accuracy of that data. So when you bring in a new system, there's a lot of time spent checking that data actually is correct. It looks very good. It's user-friendly, it's easy to read, you can find it no problem, but is that data actually accurate? So certainly in the initial stages, there's a lot of validation going on in the background just to make sure what people are seeing is actually obviously as accurate as it can be.
Do you feel like that's one of the biggest slowdowns that you face is just the time required to verify that the data is accurate?
Well, hopefully it's obviously done in quite in depth at the start of a new system. Once it's actually been established, then obviously there will be periodical checks, there needs to be, but the workload or the back checking becomes far less when you have faith in the numbers or the data or the information that you're reading. But yes, so it becomes easier, absolutely.
Sure. Frank, how about you? What's some of the biggest frustrations that you face as you're sort of taking on this new role and are focused on the analytics side of digitalization?
Now, I would say that my biggest frustration continues on from the previous role, and which has continued on from the shipowning side, and even starting from the new building side. So by far, the biggest frustration, the biggest problem that we face in the shipping industry is cross-vendor integration. We tend to talk about Internet of Things and all these fantastic matters in in the non-shipping world, and then you go into the shipping world, and it's islands of information, systems that don't speak to each other. The situation is improving somewhat, but it's still sometimes overly difficult to integrate systems. So to get data, let's say, integrated from a main engine management system into the AMS, then anyone who's dealt with the process knows how difficult this can be, as it involves protocols and unlocking from both sides. And then even more so, because this is slightly improving now, then you also get into the problems of data ownership, because everybody wants to keep the data as their own, and they provide as standard that the vendor keeps a copy of the data or even hosts the data when you as a ship owner do not want that to happen. So yeah, these are battles that I always keep fighting on several fronts. I do hope that as we mature as an industry, this is going to stop going forward.
I would imagine this is also a challenge that Jarkko faces, right? Which is, especially as you're thinking from sort of a product management perspective of creating user-friendly, usable services for integrations, as Frank mentions here. What are some of those challenges that you see, Jarkko, in terms of wanting to make modern technology, but being able to have companies receive that data in a modern format?
Yeah, so the digitalization is now ongoing, right? And also technology is not standing still. So you see evolutions of systems, whereas on board, for example, still old hardware, old software is being used. So there's a wide variety of technologies, which makes it, I would say, difficult. And maybe to emphasize Frank's point, one of the studies that we've done, and I think Rennie will tell about that later on as well, is that actually more than 90% of the people we talk to believe that weather data is relevant, but only 1 out of 3 has actually implemented into their systems, which is already stipulating that there is still, I would say, a way to go in order to get data, especially weather data, then in this case, into the customer systems. It's improving with the digitalization, but there is still a way to do regarding standards, and standards are being formed, by the way, due to the community, but there is still something to do in that sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Kevin, I'm curious, do you prioritize the types of data that you want to bring in? How do you rank sort of importance of the type of data that you're most interested in receiving?
This is actually can be an issue in itself, because there is certainly, in the case of this sensor data platform, there is so much data coming in. I mean, we're talking maybe 4,000 or 5,000 data points. And obviously, after a while, what do you do with all that data? How do you use it usefully and constructively, and make the operation more effective? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you get to know the systems, you know how to prioritize, which includes weather data as well. This is something that we're very much into as well. And obviously, you want to try and get as much data or variety of data that's applicable to that particular thing that you're dealing with, because obviously, the better and the more accurate the data is, hopefully, the better the decision you will make going forward.
Sure. How about you, Frank, when you're thinking of, again, this vast supply of data that exists out there or that is becoming available, where do you place sort of importance or priority in sorting through that?
Well, it might sound counterintuitive to what I've been saying before, but for us, the most important data remains the manually reported data. We have built our entire ERP for, if you want the lowest common denominator, all our ships have to be able to report meaningfully, and this is always using manual data. And on top of that, we add a level of granularity with externally available data through APIs, such as weather data, as we said before, or telemetry data, wherever, again, that's available, depending on the sensor, on the sensors available and what have you. The important thing is that ultimately, irrespective of whether it's manual or automatically retrieved data, it is treated in the same way, passes through exactly the same algorithms, okay, with it's handled differently, but in the end, you end up seeing all the data combined and displayed together, and there is no contradiction, let's say. There are deviations, there can always be deviations, and weather is the most typical one. You have one that is noon reports, one that is hindcast, and one that is the anemometer, right? But you can use it for cross-validation, ultimately, and sometimes for checks.
Sure, absolutely. And let me just say this, I look forward to the day where I don't have to ask this question, but I'll ask it anyways. How has COVID impacted sort of the pace or the journey of digitalization that you've been on? Frank, I'll start with you.
From the office side, I can say that there's been hardly or very little impact in our operations, really. We were, of course, already cloud native, and all our applications were hosted in the cloud, and everyone was already used, because we are a multinational organization. We're used to working with through Teams and online tools, let's say, and what have you, remote conferencing tools. So it was ultimately just a case of managing everybody working from home, which we were already doing, but just extending that further. It's a different story when we're talking about what happens on the ships, right? So I would say that as far as digitalization is concerned, a lot of projects were delayed because physical attendances are always needed, or are often needed on ships to install equipment, to service equipment, whatever it is. And with the restrictions of with COVID, of course, this has been put back. But thankfully, in some cases, we also saw that a lot of vendors, in order to keep progress going, have moved into installation by crew. So they made their equipment simpler or have provided better instructions than that. And this is a very positive thing. We're moving to a more, DIY, if you want, scenario, and at a lower cost, right?
Sure. Kevin, how about you? COVID and its impacts on your journey and any disruptions, or, there's possibilities there was even advantages because maybe allowed time to focus or something of that nature.
I think as far as the digitalization side of things, it probably has an impact as much as we thought maybe it would do. Yes, there's been some logistical issues, whether it's been shifting hardware or transporting hardware, and obviously service technicians, as Frank mentioned. But generally, overall, it has caused some disruption, but not as probably as bad. Having said that, I mean, this is obviously a subject for a totally different another webinar. I think is not the case when it comes to our seafarers getting on and getting off vessels in a timely manner. And quite frankly, the whole world's authorities should basically hold their head in shame the way that our seafarers are. In fact, I say ours, I mean the seafarers in general, world over, the way that they've been treated. But as I say, that's another subject. But if anything, I think COVID has shown a lot of businesses, large and to some extent small, have shown that because we've gone to this remote working, albeit temporary or partially or whatever, they've actually been able to maintain their business. So, yeah.
Good. And just a reminder again to our participants here, please feel free to ask questions as we go. I'm blown away by the level of expertise that we have on this panel today. So glad that everybody's joining us. We're going to jump into weather. And want to start with climate change, big topic. How has climate change sort of impacted your business, whether it be digital or otherwise? Kevin, I got you up first on my screen. I'll start with you.
Obviously, climate change is a big subject. Well, obviously, it's a huge subject. We have legislation coming in 2023 with the EEXI and the CII and decarbonization. So as far as climate change, ship owners and technical managers are having to reassess or look at how their ships are performing, what their carbon footprints are, how it may affect them commercially. So yeah, very much so. And it is without doubt probably the biggest challenge going forward in the next few years.
Sure. Can the same be said for you, Frank, where it's one of the biggest challenges and focus areas for you and your job?
Certainly. Well, what I would say is that carrying on from what Kevin said, actually, is that, of course, all the regulations that came in were an incredible boost. I definitely saw this as a positive thing coming from the performance aspect. It kind of refocused everyone and on the aspect of consumption and, let's say proper voyage reporting, if you want. We developed everything quite early, and we were able to ultimately develop the systems and into compliance reporting tools and market them as such, ultimately into third parties. But at the same time, climate change has brought forward other technical challenges, such as the management of new ship types, for example, dual fuel ships. This has been an opportunity for us. So far, we've done quite well, and even on the ship owning side, we've ended up with the last few years diverting further into ownership of new types, such as we have an LNG bunker ship, so a ship that provides LNG as fuel to other ships, as well as offshore ships that specifically target the maintenance of wind turbines, so green energy and what have you. So it has definitely impacted our business. It has definitely made us think about our overall business model and the ship types that we want to ultimately focus on. But this has we've definitely moved it to be a positive thing for us.
Sure. And Jarko, as a fellow meteorologist here, I'm curious your perspective on how climate change has sort of been viewed in the shipping industry and sort of where, you know, I don't want to call it acceptance of climate change, but the recognition of it as being a threat and sort of how DTN is handling climate change and in making our decisions on products going forward.
Yeah, so one of the results of the study again is that only 24% of the people think they are actually impacted by changing weather patterns or warming of the oceans, which I found quite on the low side because we see, I would say, as a meteorologist on a day-to-day basis, the effects of climate change, and we also did some studies in for example, in the area of weather factor. Weather factor is basically the commercial guys who kind of add days into the voyage length due to the season. In wintertime, you spend a little bit of extra time traversing, for example, the North Atlantic. What we see in the data is in the last decades, the weather is becoming a little bit harsh in wintertime. So it takes longer to traverse, for example, the Northern Atlantic. And those data points are becoming more and more clear on the meteorological side as well. So yes, that's what's happening. I would say what we see in the data. Looking at the regulations, that's the flip side. What was briefly touched base as well. You see that a lot of customers, of course, are on that decarbonization journey, and then it's at least for me as a product manager, it's I would say really good in order to try to support them on their journey, on their decarbonization journey, because a lot of the data points there are weather related with CII and all the indexes that are there, and in order to lower that carbon footprint moving forward.
Great. So Frank, I'll start with you on this question here. So where do you see the highest value of weather data being applied within your role and your company's use of weather data?
Well, I think there are three very distinct areas. First of all, the most obvious one, I think, and possibly the one with the highest savings potential ultimately, is in voyage planning and execution. So knowing, having high quality, long term, if you want, forecast data allows you to plan your voyage properly and avoid bad weather and even use the weather to your advantage. Beyond that, we rely quite heavily on highly granular hindcast data for post-voyage analytics to basically understand what happened during the voyage and obtain readings that are not, let's say, cannot be obtained measured accurately by the crew. And finally, and very importantly, on the commercially sensitive subject of charter party compliance. So whenever there is a dispute, or rather to avoid the dispute, you need to know, to be able to track the weather throughout the voyage very well, to also understand how the master is reporting, what is being reported to the charters, to make sure that it's in line with reality always, of course, and should a dispute happen, then to have objective data about what the conditions were along the voyage.
Yeah, and Kevin, for you at BW, where do you see the highest value of weather data within your organization? Oh, I think the mic went out again.
Try again.
There we go.
Yeah, that's weird. I keep dropping out. Sorry about that. Yeah, we're a great advocate of here at BWLPG with good weather data, reliable, accurate weather data, and weather routing and voyage optimization. But primarily, Obviously, it's protecting the safety of the vessel, the crew, and its cargo. The added benefits are voyage optimization, cost efficiency, cost effectiveness as well, obviously. So it has primarily it has a safety aspect, but it also has a commercial implication as well. Yes.
Where are you guys with your journey of integrating weather data into your decision making?
Yeah, I would say we're quite advanced, and can vouch. As I say, we've been a big supporter of weather routing, whether it be what I would call traditional weather routing, where there's a ship-shore interface, daily interface, and updates, or whether it's even just a software system on board for voyage optimization. And this is something that we are incorporating into our platform as well, our sensor data live real-time platform as well.
Frank, how about you? Where would you say you're on your journey with the integration of weather data?
So I think as far as hindcast data is concerned, we've been using it for approximately 2 years already, with very little change with regards to what we actually want. So I'd consider this pretty settled. With regards to forecast weather and voyage optimization, of course, we too use a number of tools already available on board, depending on what each charter provides and what have you. But we're currently working on building something in-house in which we intend to also include forecast data, of course, on our own. So we're talking about the next level of integration, where ultimately we're keeping everything within our ecosystem. So we'd like this to happen within the first half of 2022.
Great. Any obstacles that you run into from a weather data perspective?
Just okay, there are always teething issues with any provider, but that's to be expected. But that as soon as that is done, then it's pretty settled. But I'll fall back to what I mentioned earlier. Even the hindcast data is still forecast data ultimately, right? It's calculated data. It's not measured data. So there's always the question of what is the ultimate truth here. And this is always a topic that is being discussed, and there's of course no resolution, right? If you have 3 sources of what the truth could be, you have to make a judgment at the end.
Kevin, how about you? Any obstacles that you see facing with weather data?
I don't know whether it could be described as a obstacle itself. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't understand whether it's an obstacle itself. Obviously, with weather data now being so much more accurate, and the frequency is so much better than it was my time when I was at sea. But weather is weather. At the end of the day, a forecast is only a forecast. I know that it can be very accurate up to 3 days and possibly even 5 days, slightly beyond. But obviously weather changes. And so you have to be, so possibly obstacle, you have to be quite flexible and have a dynamic routing plan. You should change your plan, your routing, as the conditions change, in order that you can optimize that current voyage. So you stay steadfast. Oh, we always go this way. We should continue to do that way. You should be open, and this could be not just route headings or routing. This could be speed as well. Increases in speed when the weather is good, and pull it back a bit on the telegraph when the weather's not so good. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. We did have a question come in, and so I'll pose it open question to the group here. The conservative mindset has been mentioned a few times, and the question is, in the coming years, will there be any mindset or perspective changes happening in terms of prospects who plan to or willing to select digital solutions? And I think the question is, what mindset will need to change over time in order to continue making that aggressive journey towards digitalization.
I take this? Okay.
Sure.
I start. Ultimately, it's a continuation of what I mentioned before. It's the resistance to change. So one has to always understand that whenever you're talking about digitalization, whenever you're talking about digital products, you're talking about something that is continuously evolving. It's certainly for everyone's peace of mind to just learn a system and have that system exactly static for the next 10 years. But it's not how things are. Even the pace of change is continuously accelerating. So we need to adapt to that, and we also need to adapt the processes of our companies to become more aggressive in this respect and adapt faster, be more proactive and more systematic in the whole development and adoption process. Here we're starting to go into the whole agile and DevOps element, but keeping all that aside, everyone just needs to understand that digital is ultimately integrated into the operations of the company. It's not something separate. At least that's the way I see it.
Needs to have full organizational support, right? You need to have all departments in alignment in order to make it happen, right? And I think that's important.
Well, I think one thing that we think through too is showing the value of making that investment in change, and really, I think over time that calculation becomes more obvious and more obvious as you see sort of we make this switch to digital. Here's the fuel savings we created. Here's the performance improvement we've made with our vessel. Here's the lack of carbon that we're creating now as we've lessened our carbon footprint on the environment. And as those insights just become more and more obvious, then I think that's when sometimes executives need to see the dollar and cents of it too, right? To be very fair. And once you see that value creation of making the jump to digital, I think that's where you continue to see the snowball form and more join the journey. Speaking of decarbonization, which has popped up a couple of times, I'm curious about some of the initiatives that you guys have ongoing related to that. Kevin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, obviously, BWLPG, forefront installing and retrofitting currently 12 of our modern VLGCs for dual fuel so that they can burn LPG or conventional compliant fuel. And this obviously, helps to reduce the carbon footprint, carbon emissions due to as we're currently using has a lower carbon footprint than conventional fuels. And obviously, propane also calorific value. So this will see a reduction, certainly as far as the carbon emissions is concerned. And we see that as a step towards the eventual zero emissions that I think a lot of people accepting this is something we should be at least aiming for. And obviously that includes greenhouse gases as well. Other things that we have done is we've fitted Mewis ducts on 2 of our vessels. Majority of our vessels are already fitted with propeller boss fins. All our recently docked vessels that have come out from last year to this year have a very high grade anti-fouling system on board. And this obviously again adds to the efficiency and cuts down on resistance. And again, reduces fuel consumption, but in this case also benefits the environment.
Sure, absolutely. Great benefits there. How about Frank? How about you? Where are you focused on decarbonization and the initiatives that you guys are focused on?
I mean, for us, it starts from the new building stage. Of course, starting from the optimization of the ship, we've gone a great length. I've been involved in quite a few projects where we've had several iterations to ultimately improve the performance of the ship before it enters the water. But of course, also quite a few retrofits along the way. The life of the ship. We've done a number of. We manage quite a few container ships, so we've had a lot of cases where We changed the bow, we changed the propeller, we fitted exhaust gas boilers on the auxiliary generators. So we've had a lot of this type of green retrofits, if you want, but at the same time, there has been a big focus on the use of LNG as a fuel on some of our ships. We haven't had any retrofits, nothing similar to what Kevin mentioned, but we always keep focusing on the new fuels, and we are committed to expand our expertise into the new fuels that we do expect coming in over the next few years. On the more operational aspect, I think the most important decarbonization initiative that we did was building the Fleet Performance Center, which is our analytics hub within BSM, and building the systems around it to support this. So through this, we know exactly how the ships are performing, how they were supposed to perform, how they are performing, and what needs to be done in order to improve their performance. And a pilot that we have right now is with a company called Signal, where the fleet from one of our offices, the one in Germany, is using basically the insights, all the KPIs, all the analytics that we create from the FPC, from Fleet Performance, if you want, to provide feedback to the crew in a way to promote, let's say, with behavioral science to promote the positive change on board. So with positive messages, as opposed to hitting them on the head, as is the old style of doing things, but to promote the positive message of what comes out as a result of the improvements of optimization. And and ultimately, at the end of the day, the final thing that I can tell you is that as a company, I think BW does pretty much something quite similar, but we're committed to doing audited sustainability reporting. This will start coming this year as well, like the audited part, as well as basing it on science-based targets and carbon offsetting wherever is needed, which, of course, I have to say that as a ship manager, it's not the emissions of the ships themselves. I think that's clear for everyone.
Sure. What extent does weather data help you in that process of integrating it in to help with the decarbonization?
Well, my answer falls back to exactly what I mentioned before. So we use it in our analytics. Weather data is important to increase the accuracy and granularity of our data, to know exactly what happened. Let's say, for example, coming to the telemetry data, the high frequency data that Kevin mentioned before. How could you possibly have someone report weather data manually as often as a sensor records, right? So this is where the added granularity of hindcast comes into play. And again, with forecast and weather routing, to be able to have the highest possible impact through optimized routing and efficient operations.
Sure. Kevin, how about you? Anything to add to that in terms of weather's role in helping with?
I would probably just echo basically exactly what Frank has just. Weather data is an integral part of any ship owners or technical managers' operation of a vessel, particularly as the case now. So the answer is yes, very important.
Good. I'm going to snap that quote and put that on our website, I think, and just weather is so important. No, I really do appreciate that. It's great. Looking at the clock here, we're getting low on time. If there's another question to ask, I invite you to do so. Kevin, Frank, Jarkko, you guys have just been wonderful. Like I said, the accumulation of experience and knowledge that we've brought today is extremely exciting, and I'm honored to get to spend this time with you guys today. For our participants, there will be a recording of this that is sent out to everybody afterwards, and those that signed up that couldn't make it today will receive that as well. We're also really excited to announce that on the 11th of January, we will be releasing our market research report that we've hinted at and shared a few of the insights from today. Jarkko, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that report that's coming out, but I know we're very excited about the insights found in that.
Yeah, exactly. So I hinted a few hints on that, but I'm really excited on the report. Looking forward to receiving it as well. Yeah.
Excellent. So I haven't seen any other questions come in, and we're just about out of time. So I think it's a good time to wrap this up. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights. It's an exciting time in the industry. There are obstacles to overcome, but as we're all working together to do good for the world, but also for our organizations, try to make a cleaner atmosphere, combat global warming, make our crews safer as they travel, and try to unlock this supply chain a little bit for us. All of the work that we're doing, I think, is extremely important on that journey. So again, we're spanning all kinds of time zones here, so I appreciate everybody's flexibility to join today. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that'll wrap it up for today. Again, to our attendees, thank you so much for joining us, and look for the recording as well as signing up to receive the paper on January 11th. Otherwise, happy holidays, and again, thanks for joining us.